G'day. Earlier this year, this man, Oliver Bearman, became the youngest British driver to drive in an F1 race and the youngest driver ever to drive a Ferrari. Is he the next big thing in F1? Let's see. This is 19-year-old Oliver Bearman, Ollie for short. When he filled in for Carlos Sainz going back to the Jeddah race in Saudi Arabia earlier this year, he broke several records and scored points for Ferrari in his first ever F1 race. He hails from Chelmsford, Essex, went to King Edward VI Grammar School and is an Essex boy with an Italian twang, they say. He currently races for Prema Racing in F2. He's a member of the Ferrari Driver Academy and is a reserve driver for both Ferrari and Haas F1 teams. This year, in total, he'll do 6 FP1 sessions. And next year, 2025, everyone expects him to be in a seat in Formula One, and most probably Haas. Let's go back to the start of this year, 2024. He had a new F2 car in Bahrain, finished 15th, not a great effort. A few days later, he was in Jeddah, hoping for a better result and a better car, and indeed he put his car on pole in Friday qualifying. But he got a call later that afternoon saying, "Just be on standby, Carlos is not well, you may be called upon tomorrow." So in preparation, he attended the regular engineering meeting. Saturday morning at the Ibis Hotel, which is where a lot of the F2 drivers stay, he headed downstairs and ordered lunch with his manager Chris Harfield from WH Sports. At some point, Chris has looked at his phone and seen he's had several missed calls from Fred Vasseur. He looked at his young charge and said, "Have we done something wrong? Did you miss a meeting?" And Ollie says no. So Chris calls back Fred and he's told that Ollie is indeed needed and he's got to rush to the track. So the lunch they'd ordered, that went begging. When Ollie entered the track, nobody else knew that he was about to step up for his first drive in an F1 quali and race. And then came the announcement. At that point, things were moving ahead with Ferrari. They were doing all the preparations to get Ollie into Carlos's car. I, at the time, was over the other side of the track photographing an F1 Academy thing. And then I looked down at my phone and I see Oliver Bearman to replace Carlos Sainz. So I raced back and joined a whole host of media out the front of the Ferrari hospitality suite. Ollie's management had no idea when the announcement was going to be made, but when they saw this throng of media gathering out the front, they realised that the news had spread. Now FP3 kicks off at 4:30 p.m. and we were there, I'm thinking, a couple of hours prior, and at some point I headed out into the pit lane to shoot the goings-on in the Ferrari garage, and there I could very clearly see that a whole lot of changes were being made. Carlos's name was taken off, Oliver's was put on, the number on the front of the car had been changed, and then I headed back into the paddock to wait for him to come out, which he duly did. He bounced across the paddock and headed into the garage for his extraction test, where a driver has to prove that he can get himself out of a car within 7 seconds, and he passed that test. Now, of course, Ferrari had made a big call putting in a youngster to fill in for Carlos. They had other options. They could have called on Robert Schwartzman, Antonio Giovinazzi. They might have even given Seb Vettel a call. But certainly Fred Vasseur thought that Ollie was capable enough to handle the enormous pressure. And I think it's fair to say that not many team principals would have backed a youngster like Ollie, but Fred did. The poor performance could certainly have damaged Ollie's F1 prospects and might have even cast doubt over Fred's decision-making. Thankfully for both, that did not eventuate. Before I get on to how he went in that race, it has to be said that Ollie's always been under pressure for his whole career. He's never had an easy run. He's always been on the edge, and he was certainly under immense pressure driving for Ferrari in the Saudi Grand Prix. He qualified 11th, while his teammate Charles Leclerc qualified 2nd. And then he had a long night ahead of him before he was back at the track mid-afternoon prepping for his first Formula One race. Now, there was only space at the rear of the garage for one of Ollie's entourage, so his management decided that his dad David would take up that spot, and David was all over the media with his reactions. And certainly on the Saturday when I first was introduced to him, I think it's fair to say he was excited and anxious. Now, F2 is incredibly competitive and drivers don't always get on that well, but on the Sunday morning of the race, still at the Ibis Hotel, almost all of the F2 drivers rallied behind Ollie. They wanted him to show the racing world that all of the F2 drivers were worth considering for seats in F1. And at that point, they were very much a community, focused on Ollie putting in a good showing for the sake of them all. Come race day, he got off to a good start, and that's no mean feat. The start procedure for a Formula One car is complex, and he had very little time to learn it. He stayed out of trouble, drove a clean race, and ended up 7th, scoring 6 points for the team. Even today, 7 rounds into the 2024 season, he's still 12th on the table with just one race outing. That day, he also was voted Driver of the Day with some 48% of the votes. So who manages Ollie? W.H. Sports out of Britain. They were tipped off about him 5 years ago while he was still 14 and in karting. There he won a European Championship and a World Karting Championship, and so WH Sports contacted his dad David to strike up a deal. This was prior to COVID. He's now red-hot favourite to take a seat at Haas, and remember, F1 is different to most sports because if you look at, say, a football player, when they come into a new club and they're on their way up, they'll be eased into top-level competition. They might start with 10 minutes one game and 20 the next before they end up playing full games as a regular team member. Not so with Formula One. These drivers are thrown in at the deep end and they have to learn from their mistakes, which are hopefully not many. So what are the chances of Ollie ending up at Haas? And is his management dealing with Ao Komatsu? No. He is part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. So as such, Ferrari handles all of that negotiation. And would he have been paid for that drive in Jeddah? I think not. Typically, a reserve driver is paid a fee for the year, whether they get 0 drives or 10. But there may well have been a clause that provided him with some sort of bonus for points. And of course, he scored 6, so maybe he got a cash bonus. But certainly teams are up front with reserve drivers and they tell them that there's virtually 0 chance of you getting a drive in an F1 car. So already, Ollie is a step ahead of almost everybody else. And for that reason, he cannot be overlooked. It was interesting to note that before he had that drive in Saudi, he had some just shy of 500,000 followers on Instagram. The next day, in 24 hours, he was up at 1 million followers. He doubled his following in a day. And since then, his popularity has continually risen. He's now up at 1.8 million followers on Instagram. He's got the looks, he's got the skills and the personality that will continue to attract a good many fans. I happen to know that in Australia, the race after Jeddah, he was parked out in the F2 car park and there's a fair walk to get from there to the paddock. And most of the drivers get there with no drama. He was mobbed and at that point he realised his life had changed. I happen to know that he went out to dinner in Melbourne one night. And when he walked into the restaurant, there was no one hanging around out the front. But that had changed dramatically. When he finished, there was a sizable crowd waiting for him on his departure. So let's go back to the start of his F2 career. He debuted in 2023, aged just 17, the youngest driver on the grid at the time. He recorded numerous pole positions and wins, and in Baku, he became the first driver to dominate every session at a race event, from free practice right through to the feature race victory. You might have read a bit about Oliver, or Ollie as he's marketed under, and I can't see anywhere on his website and Instagram page where he's referred to as Oliver. And he even has a yellow bear as his logo. He's a very switched-on young man, and to talk to, charming, and I think that helps when it comes to Formula One. I've chatted with his dad, David, numerous times. Haven't met his mum yet, or his brother, who's also a karter, and his sister. Perhaps we'll see them at some point pop up at one of the tracks that he does an FP1 session in later this year. Ollie has fallen on his feet with the Ferrari Academy, and certainly they will be looking to push him as the next world champion for them, and that seat at Haas is a great stepping stone to getting him across to Ferrari perhaps at a point in the future. Would I be having any money on him to get that seat at Haas for 2025, or maybe earlier? Yeah, I think it's a given, and I think he'll do marvellously well. Now, before I leave you, I'm going to ask you to please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so, and to pick up one of my photo books, wall art, or one of my signed prints from a number of different drivers, I urge you to get across to kimmelman.com and check out some of these pages. Thanks for watching, and stay passionate. That's hopeless. Let's try all that again.